I still remember the exact moment I felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. It wasn't a dramatic scene from a movie. It was quiet, almost ordinary, but inside, my world was crumbling. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, messages from work demanding answers I didn't have, and the endless hum of doubt in my mind told me, maybe it's time to give up. But I didn't. Somehow, deep down, giving up was not an option. It started with the small, mundane things. My car broke down on the way to work, and I couldn't afford the repairs. My phone rang with another reminder that I was behind on rent, and I felt the weight of shame pressing down harder with each beep. I wanted to hide, to disappear, and just let the world move on without me. I'll be honest, I almost believed I could. But then I caught myself. I saw my reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink, tired eyes staring back at me, and I realized something crucial. I had survived worse than this. Life had knocked me down before, and every single time, I had gotten back up. What made this moment any different? Nothing. I took a deep breath and made a decision that would shape the rest of my journey. I wasn't going to let circumstances define me. I wasn't going to let fear or exhaustion make the choice for me. I might not know exactly how I'd fix things, but I knew I would find a way. Because giving up wasn't a luxury I could afford, and honestly, it never had been. That evening, I sat down with a notebook, my pen trembling in my hand, and started writing. I wrote down every problem, every worry, every deadline that felt impossible. And then I wrote a plan. Not a perfect plan, just a start. Step 1, tackle the most urgent problem. Step 2, keep moving forward, no matter how small the steps. Step 3, refuse to quit. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't inspiring in a viral TikTok way. It was raw, messy, and exhausting. I cried. I yelled at the walls. I questioned every choice I had ever made. But through all that, I also felt a flicker of something stronger than fear. Determination. By the time night fell, I had a list. A real, actionable list. Not everything was solved, but I felt the first spark of control returning to my life. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed in my ability to fight through, to survive, to overcome. I didn't know the full story yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Giving up was not an option, and I was done letting life dictate my limits. That night, I went to bed with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The path ahead was uncertain, scary, and exhausting, but it was mine to walk. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what came next, I would keep going. Because surrendering was never, ever part of my story. Morning came like a challenge. The sunlight streamed through the window, harsh and honest, and it felt like the world was daring me to face it. I didn't have answers for everything, but I had my list, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of clarity. My first step was small, almost laughably small. I called the repair shop to fix my car. That phone call felt monumental, as if saying the words out loud made the problems real, but also made them solvable. I quickly realized that taking action, even in tiny ways, was different from hoping or wishing. Before, I'd spent hours stewing in anxiety, imagining every worst-case scenario. But now, I was moving. And movement, no matter how small, created momentum. I filled out forms, made calls, and even organized my kitchen counter into a semblance of order. Nothing fixed the bills, the deadlines, or the stress overnight, but at least I was taking control of what I could. It wasn't easy. Every step felt heavy, like wading through water with weights tied to my ankles. I still felt fear, constant, gnawing fear, but I refused to let it freeze me. Every no I got, every setback that seemed to confirm my doubts, only made me dig deeper. I reminded myself repeatedly, giving up was not an option. And if I faltered, I fell forward instead of backward. That day, I also discovered the power of small victories. Paying one overdue bill felt like climbing a mountain. Sending a difficult email that I'd been avoiding for weeks felt like winning a battle I hadn't even seen coming. I started to notice that the universe responded, not with miracles, but with opportunities. Tiny openings I could turn into progress if I kept my eyes open. By evening, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but something had shifted inside me. I realized that survival wasn't just about avoiding failure, it was about embracing the fight itself. It was about showing up for myself every single day, even when I didn't feel like it. Even when the world seemed stacked against me, I could still take one step forward. And that was enough. Before bed, I added new goals to my notebook. Not huge, unreachable dreams, but tangible, actionable things I could accomplish in the next 24 hours. I understood now that success wasn't a sudden breakthrough. It was the accumulation of small, persistent actions. Each call, each email, each task checked off the list was proof that I was capable, resilient, and still standing. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far I had already come. From feeling utterly defeated to taking decisive action in just one day, it was remarkable, even if no one else noticed. I understood something crucial. Life wasn't going to wait for me to feel ready. It was going to move, with or without me. And I had made the choice to move with it, no matter how slow, no matter how hard. Giving up wasn't an option, and now I knew why. Every step I took forward, no matter how small, was proof that I could keep going. I had survived this far, and I would survive the next challenge too. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "You're stronger than you think." Just when I thought I was gaining traction, life threw me a storm. Not a metaphorical drizzle, an all-out, relentless storm that seemed determined to drown me. My car broke down again, the repair taking longer than expected. Work piled up with deadlines I didn't have the energy to meet. And worst of all, a personal betrayal hit me like a punch to the chest. Someone I trusted let me down when I needed support the most. I won't lie, for a moment, the idea of giving up sneaked back into my mind. It whispered, soft but insistent, "Maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe you're not strong enough." For a second, I let myself imagine walking away, leaving the mess behind. It was tempting. It was easier. It was human. But then I remembered something important. Storms, no matter how fierce, always pass. And if I had survived the first wave, I could survive this one too. Giving up had never solved a problem. It had only left me with regret and what ifs. I refused to let fear dictate my choices. I refused to let pain become my excuse. So I faced the storm head-on. I worked through the exhaustion, forcing myself to focus on one task at a time. I made lists again, prioritized what mattered most, and let go of perfection. Some things had to wait. Some battles weren't mine to fight. But the ones I could control, I tackled relentlessly. I sent the difficult emails, made the calls, and fixed the little things that were still within my reach. The emotional storm was harder to weather. I cried in my car, yelled at my empty apartment, and questioned why life seemed so determined to challenge me. But even in my darkest moments, I held on to a single truth: quitting wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. I reminded myself of the small victories from before, how a single step could turn despair into action, and I clung to that. There were moments when the weight threatened to crush me completely. I woke up with a knot in my stomach and went to bed with one still there. But each day I survived was proof that I could endure, that I could push through. Slowly, imperceptibly, the storm began to weaken. Problems didn't vanish overnight, but I learned how to navigate them, how to bend without breaking. By the end of the week, I felt a strange sense of pride. I wasn't victorious in the traditional sense. Bills were still unpaid, repairs unfinished, but I had survived, and more importantly, I had fought. I had not run, not cried for too long, not surrendered. And that mattered more than any immediate success. I realized something crucial during that storm. Resilience isn't built when life is easy. It's forged in the fire of relentless challenges, in the moments when giving up seems the most reasonable, and yet, you don't. You keep standing. You keep moving. You keep fighting. By the time the storm finally passed, I knew that nothing in the future could terrify me as much as I once thought. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had, a stubborn, unshakable determination that refused to quit. Giving up wasn't an option because I had already proven to myself that I could endure, survive, and rise, no matter how hard the world tried to pull me down. After weeks of struggle, exhaustion, and constant pressure, something shifted. Not suddenly, not like a miracle falling from the sky, but gradually, imperceptibly at first. The small steps I had been taking all along began to compound, and slowly, the results started to show. It was the first time in months that I felt a glimmer of hope that wasn't clouded by fear. I started noticing the little wins. A client at work responded positively to a project I had been worried would fail. One overdue bill was finally cleared, freeing me from the weight I had been carrying. Even the car, finally repaired, felt like a symbol of how far I had come. These weren't huge victories, but to me, they were monumental. They proved that persistence, no matter how exhausting, worked. I realized that giving up had never been an option because the alternative, surrender, was far worse. Every step forward, no matter how small, reminded me that I had control over at least part of my life. And with control came confidence, and with confidence came momentum. I began to approach each day with intention, making deliberate choices instead of reacting to crises. It wasn't perfect. Some days, I still felt the old doubts creeping in, the fear of failure whispering in my ear. But now, I had a strategy: acknowledge the fear, but don't let it stop me. I had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of it. And every time I pushed forward, even when tired, even when the odds seemed stacked against me, I reinforced that truth. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place. My finances stabilized enough to stop the constant panic. I rebuilt bridges with people who mattered, learning to trust myself and others again. Work, once overwhelming, became manageable because I approached it step by step, breaking the impossible into achievable goals. And most importantly, I rebuilt my faith in myself, the belief that no matter what came next, I could face it and survive. One evening, I sat on my balcony, looking at the city lights below, and I realized something profound. The struggles, the storms, the moments I wanted to quit, they had all taught me something invaluable. They had taught me resilience. They had taught me patience. They had taught me that giving up was never truly an option, because inside me was a strength I didn't know I had. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely proud, not because life had suddenly become easy, but because I had refused to quit. I had fought tooth and nail, stumbled, fallen, and risen again, over and over. And I had emerged stronger, smarter, and more capable than I ever imagined. I realized that breakthroughs rarely come all at once. They are the sum of countless tiny victories, of small actions that eventually tip the balance. And I had learned that no obstacle, no matter how overwhelming, could stop me if I refused to give up. As I watched the night settle around me, I knew one thing for certain: the fight wasn't over, and challenges would come again. But now, I faced them with a new perspective. I had learned the most important lesson of all: giving up was never an option, because my story was far from finished, and I was determined to write every chapter on my terms. It's hard to describe the moment when all the pieces began to click into place, when the fog of struggle lifted just enough to see the horizon clearly. After months of battling doubt, fear, and setbacks, I reached a point where I could finally breathe, and not just breathe, but stand tall with pride. I had made it. Not because life had been easy, but because I refused to quit. The journey wasn't glamorous. No one clapped when I stayed up late finishing tasks. No one celebrated when I finally paid a mounting bill or repaired a broken car. But the victory was mine, and that was more than enough. I had learned to measure success not by recognition, but by resilience, the ability to keep moving forward when giving up seemed tempting, even logical. By now, I had developed routines and systems that carried me through difficult days. I learned to tackle problems with focus, breaking the impossible into manageable steps. I strengthened relationships with people who genuinely supported me, and I let go of those who drained my energy. Work that once overwhelmed me became manageable because I faced it head-on, refusing to let fear control my actions. And then came the real breakthrough. It wasn't a single, monumental moment. It was a collection of small triumphs that finally added up. I paid off debts that had haunted me, rebuilt my savings, and even found time to invest in myself, reading, learning, and pursuing projects that brought me joy. I discovered a confidence I didn't know I had, one that allowed me to dream again and trust my own judgment. What struck me most was how different I felt internally. The storms that had once threatened to break me now felt like proof of my strength. I realized that life's hardships weren't punishments. They were tests, shaping me into someone capable of enduring, adapting, and rising. I looked back at the nights I cried, the moments I doubted myself, the times I wanted to give up, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Each struggle had been a stepping stone to this moment. Standing there, I understood that triumph isn't the absence of difficulty. It's the refusal to let difficulty define you. It's the commitment to move forward, even when progress feels invisible. It's the courage to say, I will not quit, no matter what. And that courage had carried me through the darkest days to the brightest ones. As I reflect on my journey, one lesson stands above all others. Giving up was never truly an option. The hardships, the fear, the exhaustion, they weren't the end of my story. They were the chapters that made the ending worth celebrating. I am not defined by the obstacles I faced, but by the way I chose to confront them over and over again. Now, when I look ahead, I do so without fear. I know challenges will come, but I also know my strength. I have learned the most powerful truth of all. Resilience isn't something you are born with. It's something you build, day by day, choice by choice, step by step. And I have built it. I have proven it to myself. Giving up was never an option. And because I refused to give in, I stand here today, not just surviving, but thriving, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever comes next. This is my story, my journey, and my triumph. And it is far from over.